Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's masterclass. My name's Jordan Taylor. I am a director and coach here at Retrain Search, and I'm here today to talk to you about your complete retain search system, how to make sure you guys are winning retained business, as much of it as possible as we move into 2026. Cool. So welcome to everyone on LinkedIn. Welcome to everybody on YouTube. And before we start, I would love to get a feeling for a couple of things. If you could pop in the chat, firstly, whereabouts in the world are you all? I'm assuming we've probably got some people in the UK. I'm assuming we've probably got some people in the US, and who knows, maybe even further afield. And I would also love to know what percentage of your work in 2025 has been on a retained basis. Again, I'm assuming there's going to be a real mix. Some people fully contingent, some people doing everything retained, and probably everything else in between too. Okay, so what I've got to share with you today, I'm going to be honest, guys, I haven't got a clue how long it's going to take. It's a brand new session that we've never done before, kind of combining all of the smaller sessions we do throughout the year. I'd have thought somewhere between half an hour and 45 minutes, but we've allowed an hour for the session. We've got loads of time, so there's plenty of time for me to answer any questions that you guys have got too. What I would ask is, as we go through the session, either write them down and we'll come to them at the end, or just pop them in the chat as we go. And if I haven't handled them in the rest of what we talk about, then we'll make sure we come and handle them at the end and answer the questions. So I'm seeing there are some people at 100% retained. That was someone on YouTube. There's people joining us in Florida. So listen, let's not stand on ceremony. Let's jump into it and get started. Okay. So I always like to start by just giving some background into us and who we are. So we were founded by Louise Archer. Lou is the founder and now CEO of Retrain Search, and we are a fast-growing recruitment training business, revolutionizing how recruitment agencies operate. Lou's journey began with success and later quite a bit of frustration as a contingent recruiter. And that experience, though, led Louise to explore the world of retained and executive search, and to deepen her expertise in talent mapping, in pipelining and insight studies. It was just over 5 years ago now that Lou launched Retrain Search with what was a pretty bold mission to help recruiters transition to that retained business model, empowering each and every one of them to work more strategically, more effectively, and importantly, more profitably. And a bit about me. So as I say, my name is Jordan Taylor. I'm a director and coach here at Retrain Search. What was it? It was probably about 5 years ago now, actually, that I was a contingent recruiter experiencing kind of all of the frustrations that come with that no win, no fee model. I had no commitment from clients. I was working on a fastest finger first approach. I had candidates dropping out all over the place. And in hindsight, I spent most of my week working for free until I graduated from the Retrain Search course and never worked on a contingent basis again. Over the year, delivering millions on a retained basis, from senior vice presidents in California, managing directors in the UK, sales leaders across Europe. I just used the tools and the lessons learned from this training to build stronger and deeper partnerships with my clients across the globe. I spent a little bit of time as part of the community helping Louise out when she was off on holiday and stuff, but she finally convinced me to come on board full time as a coach. That was in December 2021. So any week now, I've been here about 4 years, and I'm delighted to have been able to help thousands of recruiters go on the same journey that I went on. Okay, so I think it helps to look at where we are today, right? And what we face, the challenge we face in the market. And Lou actually wrote a newsletter on this recently. On one side, we've got retained search firms, right? Your Corn Ferries, your Hydrick and Struggles of the world, and they're posting double-digit revenue growth. On the other hand, contingent recruiters such as Robert Half, Hayes, Page Group are reporting year-on-year declines in fees and in profits. The divergence is stark. It really is. Retained search firms are thriving. Why, though? Well, what I found is retained search sits at that high-touch, high-value end of the spectrum. Clients aren't just paying for CVs or resumes. They're buying market intelligence, structured assessment, stakeholder management, advisory solutions. And these elements are hard to commoditize, right? They deliver real strategic impact at the board and at the leadership level. Because the value is strategic, the model commands commitment, exclusivity, upfront fees, and trusted partnership. That shields it from pure price competition and kind of transactional churn. And that's kind of why Contingent's struggling, right? Because it's exposed on both fronts. Clients, like many now, expect real low cost, rapid CV delivery. You've got technology, you've got AI sourcing tools, internal talent platforms, direct outreach. They're swallowing that transactional CV pushing end of the market. Where the proposition is simply who can find a candidate fastest, algorithms, job boards, internal recruiters, they can often do it quicker and they can do it cheaper. And that leaves contingent recruiters, that leaves contingent firms fighting over shrinking margins. So I'm really glad that you've joined us today on this masterclass, because I'm really hopeful it could transform 2026, or at least start to shape your thinking ahead of the new year. But that being said, I am not here to tell you that you need to transition 100% to retained. There is a huge misconception in the industry that if you want to bring retained into your business, you've got to go all in, flip everything overnight, stop taking on contingent work. And this belief is stopping so many recruiters from making that shift, right? A shift that could completely change their income, their delivery, and their stress levels. The reality of it is you can absolutely have your cake and eat it. You can keep the fastest, most exciting contingent wins and build a predictable, high-value retained revenue stream alongside it. You can win one retained project a year or a quarter, or build it until it becomes 20, 50, 80, 100% of your business. There's no right way, just your way. And if you're doing great contingent work that you know you'll get paid for, amazing, keep going. But the other work where that isn't happening, the times when you're working for free, delivering without commitment, hoping someone will pay you at the end, irrespective of how unlikely you truly feel it is, that's the bit that I really want to help you stop, because that's the bit that's costing you the most. So I found that most people providing that permanent direct hire recruitment service would like to be operating on a retained basis. Often that's to provide forecastable revenue, but it has several of the benefits too. It leads to a huge improvement in productivity. That helps with motivation, commission, retention of your best people, therefore. But importantly, the education and upskilling enables us to perform and form much deeper, more meaningful relationships with our clients. And because of that, the client sees a huge benefit too. Their service levels improve dramatically. And at the same time, the time and the money that they need to spend on recruitment reduces. Often they're forgotten about, but candidates even benefit. They get a cleaner process, a more enjoyable journey. So let's get started on some of the essentials to winning retained. And then I'll go on to how to move to true retained search, kind of no halfway projects. So tip number one is lead the client, right? The first thing that you have to do is realize that this is your meeting. This is your pitch. This is your conversation. The client are relying on you. They're relying on your experience, your expertise to solve the problem. So own it. One of the biggest things I see get in the way of people winning is actually just holes in that BD process. Small things that can be fixed so quickly. So here's a few tips for you. Firstly, when it comes to new business development, I can't remember ever winning a retained piece of work over the phone. And of all of the failed pitches that I've unpicked, this is one of the really common denominators. So do not risk it. Every single lead is just too valuable to screw it up with such a simple mistake. Get on a Zoom, get on a Teams call, have a proper conversation that they will not forget. Better still, get out and see them if it's at all possible. Like, there's no need to overcomplicate it, right? You just send them a Calendly link if you use Calendly, or if you're on the call with them, I'd say, brilliant. I'd love to kind of find out all about it and the challenge that you face. I'm going to drop across my Zoom link. Let's jump on there. Or I'm actually downtown tomorrow afternoon. What time works for you for us to meet and have a coffee? I promise you, you'll see a significant increase in conversion just by stopping pitching over the phone. But then when you have that meeting, do not just take a brief. That isn't what it is, right? When we're carrying out that form of kind of diagnostic, it's not about where they need to be based and what salary they want to pay, right? You need to find pain. It's so tempting when they start talking to you about a requirement to just switch into brief taking mode. Listen, I've been there, I've done it, I know. Listen to the requirement and then we just explain the solution, right? Well, no, that isn't what we do. You want to make them go back to the start. Find out why they're talking to you or even entertaining having a conversation with you and not the firms that they've worked with before. If you don't go through a diagnostic, if you don't do a thorough diagnostic and kind of uncover the effectiveness of previous methods, then it can be really difficult to handle some of the objections that will come up down the line. For example, what if they say, why would I pay you a retainer when I've got loads of agencies that will work it without it? If you've done your work at the front end, it's a breeze. I'd say absolutely. I'm not suggesting you should change the way you're working for this type of hire if it's working for you. However, what you told me earlier is that you're frustrated, that the quality of candidates is poor, or the last position like this took 6 months to fill, and this is the way to solve that. I'd love to demonstrate the effectiveness of working in this way. A rhythm that I found works really, really well is to start with the individual. Get them talking about them, get control of the meeting by asking the first question. Yeah, it might be, I'm really keen to find out all about the business and this position. But firstly, your career trajectory is really impressive. Yeah, how are you finding life at your current employer? It must be very different from your previous employer. Yeah, I'd almost have a candidate conversation with them first and then move into the business and what's going on. Demonstrate knowledge and build credibility by showing that you've done your research and you know your industry, and then move on to talent acquisition. Yeah, how are you finding the market for talent at the moment? And this is where you find out about what methods they normally use and how well it typically goes for them. Make sure you ask them gently about how they'd usually go about making a hire like this and how it usually goes for them. Do they always get what they want? Do they get it when they want it? And is it an enjoyable process? Only when you found out why they're talking to you do you move in to the reason that they want to talk, which is their actual need or their requirement. But importantly, show them, don't tell them, right? Once you know what they need, once you're confident that you can help them, show them how, what it will be like to work with you. Don't just tell them because it's boring, right? I want you to bring you, your story, your background and experience to life, all with visuals. Explain and illustrate what you want to do, how you're going to do it differently. It is a scientific fact that visuals remain in the mind longer than the spoken word. So reinforce it with evidence. Talk through a recent project, what problem they faced. It might be, for example, that the contingent model just wasn't yielding results for them, and explain how you solved it with that retained methodology. And then make sure you reinforce it, right? Don't finish any pitch with, so I'll send you a proposal or something weak. Yeah, make sure you close by recommending that retained solution, demonstrating process and capability with a nice case study. And the close can be something like, I'm absolutely certain of my capability to achieve a superb result on this project. If what you're looking for is just another contingent firm to send CVs in the hope that they get lucky and something sticks, then I'm not the right choice. If you're looking to work with an expert that wants to commit and work in partnership and work with you until we reach a result, then I would love to be the one to do that. What do you say? You've got to bring them to that yes or no. As I say, not just I'll send you a proposal for you to review. Tip number 2 feels quite obvious, right? You've got to pitch like a pro consistently. There has to be consistency. You can't just wing it. If you want to build retained into something that's a significant and consistent part of your desk or business in 2026, it has to be consistent. So I'm going to show you a section of the pitch just for time's sake. But if you ever want any advice, I can talk you through kind of what it needs to look like, or we can chat about your specific pitch. I'll ask Kirsty, who's in the chat, to just kind of pop a link into my diary. So let's imagine I've been talking to a client. I carried out that diagnostic that we mentioned, that in-depth discovery to find out their needs, how they've gone about TA so far. Yeah, the reason that diagnostic is so important is because it gives real credibility to the ultimate recommendation, right? I want you to imagine you walk in to see a doctor with an awful headache. You walk into the door of the doctors, and without asking a single question, the doctor says, "I've got the perfect tablets for you." How likely are you going to be to trust that recommendation at that stage? Not very. But what actually happens in reality is you go in to see the doctor, they ask a whole ton of questions, right? They diagnose the problem, and then they recommend the solution. And I don't know about you guys, but I just go home and take the tablets. I don't even know if my doctor's qualified. The quality of the diagnostic and the questions is enough to give me that belief. And I'm sharing this to highlight the importance of that consultation stage. Of course, we've got to find out the specifics of the requirement and almost that job spec information. But it's the gravitas, sorry, it's the depth and the quality of that diagnostic. Yeah, that gives the gravitas to that ultimate recommendation. So let's imagine that I've done that. Here's how I might recommend a retained solution. I'd start by flipping from that diagnostic into the pitch. So I might say something like, "That's really excited to hear. It's a great, great time, it sounds like, for the business. It's great to hear there are big growth plans for 2026. I understand that means there are talent acquisition plans too, which is really positive and exciting to hear. But I do appreciate there have been some challenges. It sounds like you've found it difficult this year to recruit and attract that high caliber talent you're looking for. I want to reassure you, you're not alone. Other organizations that I've been speaking to are having the same challenge. It's difficult, competition is fierce, but I'd like to reassure you that we can help. I'm helping other organizations solve this exact problem right now, and I'd love to share my thoughts on how I could do the same for you." I would start by saying, so like you, we've been growing and we've been changing. So I'd just like to update you on a few things. You know that we are completely focused on the tech industry, but what you might not know is that our whole vision, our whole purpose as a business is to be the firm most known for providing an incredible experience to both our clients and our candidates in an industry where, unfortunately, that just isn't always the case. We are so focused on this as a business that we measure it using something called NPS, Net Promoter Score. We basically survey every single client that we work with and every candidate that we secure an interview for, and we ask them on a scale of 1 to 10 how likely they would be to recommend our service. Our score currently runs at plus 87. To put that into context, Apple is running at plus 60. So we're incredibly, incredibly proud of that score and of the awards that we've won as a direct result. You'll know us for the work that we've done with you in the construction space, but what you might not know is that we also have expertise in design and HSE. And although a lot of our legacy sits in telecoms, we do more and more work across automotive, across energy, and we're even doing more and more in the defense space now as well. I'm proud to say that some of the biggest firms in the world depend on us and rely on our service, and some of the smallest too, that I'm sure you've never heard of. But trust me, with the hires they're making and the people they're attracting, you'll be hearing of them soon, and pretty much everything else in between. But this is the bit that I really wanted to get to, because we work with our clients in different ways, depending entirely upon the circumstance. For easy to fill everyday hires, we provide a contingent recruitment service, and I'm sure you'll be familiar with this. That's a no-win, no-fee service. Often it's in competition with other suppliers. There's very little to no commitment on either side, but it can work for straightforward or lower level positions. However, when things start to get more challenging, whether that's a difficult location, a niche skill set, hard to fill, senior, confidential, it might even be multiple hires, we instead apply a search methodology and retain search. That's our headhunting service. And lastly, we partner clients who are embarking on larger periods of growth or have kind of ongoing needs. In that instance, we apply that same rigorous search process, but we offer economies of scale for multiple hires and bigger projects. I would go on to say that in some cases, that contingent, that no-win, no-fee recruitment model works, as you found. However, in the case of a more critical or challenging position, whether it's time sensitive, a niche skill set, senior, multiple positions, it is absolutely necessary for us to apply a more rigorous methodology. Essentially, some financial commitment from you enables me to apply that robust search process, but importantly, it enables me to commit and work with you until we reach a result. Okay, so I hope that helped. That's a small subsection of a much bigger pitch, right? But hopefully, it kind of starts to give you some of the word tracks as to how you can start recommending retained as the right solution for customers. And again, just to highlight, if you do want to have a conversation around the pitch, book some time in with me. I'm more than happy to spend some time in that with you. And then tip 3, you've guessed it, right? Sometimes when the pitch goes really well, the customer just says yes, and it's really, really nice when that happens. More often than not, though, they have questions and objections. And of course, we have to be able to handle them. Now, there are loads. We go through over 27 in our program, but I just want to kind of give you a few of the common ones. The first one is all of the other agencies work with us contingently, right? So why should I pay you up front? And I covered this earlier. The key to this lies in the diagnostic. In that I would say, if you're happy with the service you're receiving and the way they're working is working, don't do anything different. I'm not here to confuse things or muddy the water, but you told me it's not. Excuse me, you told me you're frustrated with the quality of those CVs or the lack of resumes coming through. And all of my experience tells me this is the way we solve this problem. I would love the opportunity to show that to you. Will you let me demonstrate my capability on this project? Yeah. The other one is we just don't like putting a position with just one agency, right? So I would say, okay, no problem, I understand. However, it's worth knowing that as recruiters, when we work on a contingent or subject to chance basis, we're typically working between 5 and 15 jobs at any given time. That isn't just us, that's all agencies. We all do the same thing because we're effectively working for free, right? We have to grade or rank those jobs in order of priority to work closest to the fee. Basically, we're spending more time on the positions that we're most likely to fill, balancing our risk. Now, if a job is with a great brand, it's in a great location, it's got easy to find skill sets, it's higher on our list because we're more likely to fill it. But if for any reason it's more challenging or it requires more work, it becomes difficult for us to justify spending time on because there's always the chance that we put loads of work in and you decide not to recruit it. So it actually ends up falling down our list. You end up at the bottom of the list, especially if there are other agencies working on it. So it's really easy to think that by working with multiple recruiters, you're multiplying the effort. The reality, though, you're getting less effort from each one. You're diluting the effort. Because it's also worth understanding that with limited time to risk, we're scraping the surface of the talent pool. Right? Think at the top of an iceberg. You're seeing the 30% of the talent pool who are responding to LinkedIn messages. They're answering phone calls or applying to the job advert. The 70% who don't, normally the best candidates, the passive talent, yeah, they're just not engaged because it takes too long. And unfortunately, it's the same candidates that are approached multiple times. We all approach the top 30% of the iceberg. So they get multiple approaches from different agencies, and you end up looking like a house for sale with several for sale signs outside. It doesn't help us now. It doesn't help us fix this problem, but it doesn't help your employer brand moving forward either. Yeah. So whether it's me or somebody else that you choose to do this with, this is the way you're going to solve the problem. Of course, I would love to be the person to do that. What do you say? Okay. And lastly, what about this? And it happens a lot, right? People end up in that middle ground of exclusivity. What do we do if they say, well, we'll give it you exclusively instead? That's what you need, isn't it? I would say no, unfortunately, it's not. I have been let down on that basis before. I've worked really, really hard on positions which are exclusive only for clients to pull the job. It really is just too much of a risk for me to spend the amount of time, the amount of resource needed to make sure that I can guarantee you a result. And I just can't do what I know I need to do to fill this without some financial commitment from you. So will you let me show you how it works? I'd love to demonstrate the approach on this project. Okay. Well, what are the big things holding you guys back? Well, actually, one of them is misconceptions. And if you don't truly get it, your customers never will. So tip number 4 is be crystal clear in your product and what problem it solves, what value it adds. Let's look at some of the main misconceptions I hear. The first one, right, because there are so many preconceptions about who can move to retained. The first one is that it's not right for my market, right? Like no one retains in my country, no one retains in my vertical. It just isn't a done thing. The truth is, it does not matter what market you're operating in. Doesn't matter what salary levels you're working at. I've seen mid-level contingent teams go from no retained revenue to over 500,000 in months. Another one, the first retainer, it was like a 500k base salary. The fee was like nearly 100 grand. And so many small firms and independents after 6 months are fully retained. It is not an excuse, right? It really isn't. If somebody offered me 2 desks tomorrow, one was fully contingent, no one had ever done retained, and one was fully retained, I would choose a contingent desk every day of the week and twice on a Sunday. And let me explain why. So retained solves problems for businesses, right? That's the reason they retain, because it fixes issues. When they're struggling to hire, when they're struggling to attract the right people, retained allows us to apply the time and the resource needed to see a result for customers. It works, right? The problem is, if you're working in a market that's fully retained or very, very commonplace, none of the customers have problems because they're all being fixed. So the contingent market is the best opportunity. That's the best place to sell retained because they have issues. They've got burning holes in their business that are not being solved by contingent firms. So no excuse. If you're thinking this isn't done very often in my market, huge opportunity, get out there and do it. But if it's all that great, why haven't we done it already? Well, I found that most contingent recruiters want to. Often they've understood the pricing model, they've understood how it works, they've had some training on how to sell retainers, and some people have won, right, inconsistently, but often they haven't managed to implement it consistently. And in my experience, the main reason for that is there's still a huge barrier. There's gaps in knowledge, experience, and that generates that lack of confidence, which causes negative mentality and perception. I found that most recruiters have either won retainers and struggled to deliver, or they know someone who has won, struggled to deliver. Sometimes they don't actually think it's any different. So I want to take you back to that objection I handled a minute ago, right? The one about we like to work with multiple agencies. This is where you guys need to get to with your mindset, understanding the value it adds to customers and why it allows you to add that value. So think about the needs of a customer. Think about that really challenging hire and what happens on a contingent basis when any of us are working 10 jobs at the same time. It's really difficult. The 3 or 4 agencies on it, we send a couple of CVs early on, we don't get the feedback we want, and then 2 to 3 weeks down the line, an easier role lands on our desk. Something easier, lower hanging fruit comes in front of us, and we put all of our focus and priority on that, as do all of the other agencies. That leaves customers in positions where, and I hear this all the time, we saw quite a few CVs at the start, but it's tailed off. We've not really seen anyone in a few weeks now. This is the opportunity that you've got. You have to deliver a great level of service and deliver results for customers, but you're able to do that when you've got financial commitment. And that's what retained search is. It's financial commitment from a client, which allows us to apply a robust process, mitigating against all of the things that could go wrong, giving us and the client near as damn it a guaranteed result, but not just any result, the best result that is available to us all in the market at that time. And it is that the client buys. But I think it's important to state that it isn't always necessary, right? And it isn't always the right solution to sell. And in my experience, there are 3 main instances. Firstly is with an easy to fill, straightforward hire. It often just isn't necessary, right? You don't need to apply that structured, rigorous process. There's no need to use a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. Ultimately, the client is unlikely to pay a retainer if he or she doesn't need to. But the exact opposite of that is true as well. If it's an impossible to fill position, But my caveat to that is that all positions are fillable. If the need from the client is there, if the willingness to flex the parameters and eventually find a solution together is there, which after all is what retained search is all about, then fine. But if the client is unpleasant, if they have expectations that are impossible to manage, if they won't commit to the full process, it spells trouble, right? And my advice would be say no and walk away. Trust me, your future self will thank you. And lastly, whilst I now only work on a retained basis and I would never work without financial commitment from my client, and I now love recruitment as a direct result, there are some consultants that would prefer to work contingently. And these consultants don't want to commit. They hate being tied to a client. And if you're one of them, if you're sitting there thinking that sounds like me, there's nothing wrong with that, right? If that's what you prefer, no problem. If the going gets tough, you want to bail out, okay. The reality of it is some assignments are going to be easy, some are going to be a pain in the ass, and you need to commit regardless. If you don't want to, don't take the retainer. But the consultants who care about the service you're providing, who care about your clients, the outcomes that they see, and you want to do a proper job, it's those of you who are going to be most successful with this. So many recruiters, in their ambition to get to retained, find themselves in a retingent world, right? And I've found that is less than ideal. Let me elaborate a little bit on that. So what is retingent? It's basically when a recruiter takes money up front, but still operates like a contingent recruiter. You've secured a fee, but you haven't secured control, commitment, a proper process. And what it does is kind of create this hybrid model that has got all of the pressure of retained and all of the chaos of contingent, right? Most firms, they think retained is just getting money up front. But true retained means a rigorous, defined search process. It means structured and staged delivery. It means alignment with best practice, as the Shrek firms, your biggest search firms in the world, would do. It means expectations set with the client up front. No skipping steps to pacify the client. When firms don't fully understand that, delivery breaks, even with a retainer paid. Because clients still reject candidates without validity. They still change the brief. They still add stakeholders into the process right at the end. They still just want to see more candidates, even though you've sent them a short list of perfect profiles. They still allow internal or external candidates to appear out of nowhere. They slow down and pause the process. They delay decisions, interviews, offers. Why do they do that? Because nobody has taken control of the process. Retained isn't about money. It's about leadership. It's about ownership. The money just allows you to do those things. So I want to share a couple of bits of advice on avoiding that sticky middle ground, right? By focusing on 3 key pillars: price, commitment, and execution. So pricing, right? And often most people associate retained with a change in pricing model, and they believe that getting money up front is the holy grail. But you start to realize how far away this is from true retained when you look at how the big search firms do it. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with the term Shrek, it's an acronym for the names of the biggest search firms. So it's Spencer Stewart, Heidrick and Struggles, Russell Reynolds, Egon Zehnder, Korn Ferry. And they typically charge 1/3 of total estimated compensation in 3, but kind of 4 stages. The first stage is on commencement of the project. The second invoice is sent 30 days later, and the balance 30 days after that, regardless of whether or not a candidate has been found. In fact, the fourth and final invoice becomes payable based on any actual difference between estimated compensation and actual compensation, if or when a candidate is actually hired. Right? So there's no commitment to any result there at all, but I appreciate most of us mere mortals will never get away with that as a payment model. So here's what's always worked for me. I would say, sure, the cost of this typical solution is higher than a normal contingent service because there's more work, there's more time, there's more resource involved ultimately. It carries a fee of 30%, and we break that down into 3 stages. The first third is payable on commencement of the assignment. Second, payable on confirmation of an agreed shortlist, and the balance is due on placement on completion of the project. Now, that might sound like a radical departure from normal contingent terms or even that kind of contingent model that we've discussed, but it's a bloody good deal when you compare it to those Shrek firms and those big search firms. Here's another fundamental that many people trip up on, and I did too, right? Most people, in return for financial commitment, they commit to fill the position, which again is quite a stark contrast to the wise ones because they commit to execute the search. Think about the payment model and let me ask you a question. If the client is paying all of the fee after 60 days, irrespective of if a candidate has been or ever will be found, what do you think they're paying for? They're paying for the process, right? Again, I would love the clients to be happy to give me all of the fee, even if I haven't found a candidate, but it just doesn't normally wash. What does work for me is making sure I'm committing to executing the search and not committing to fill. After all, it's not me that actually makes the call to hire. So how on earth could I commit to fill? How can anyone? But then how do you answer that big question of what if you don't fill it? Well, I would say the financial commitment from you allows me to commit in return to ensure that we reach a result. But this is a difficult search. We know that. You've been looking for a while. I understand it's not straightforward. And I've also got to be a realist, right? I can't guarantee that the result we end up reaching is going to be the exact result we set out to achieve at the beginning in that briefing call. Because we're dealing with people, there are variables at play here that are outside of my control. Maybe the skill set you want doesn't exist. Maybe it does, and they're just not looking for a new role right now. But what I can guarantee you is our process, that it will be thorough, it will be rigorous, it will be transparent. We'll share with you every step of the way our workings. And that means even though normally we find the perfect candidate, if at any point we struggle, we don't leave you high and dry. We'll work with you to re-steer the search accordingly. And that means when we reach a result, which we will, you will be 100% confident that it's the best result available to you in the market at that time. I would close by saying our success rate on a retained basis sits at over 98%. If I thought there was any chance we'd fail on this project, I would not be recommending this is the way we do it. I wouldn't jeopardize that success rate, but I'd love you to let me show you. What do you say? And the other major hazard in taking money up front without having knowledge and experience of true retained search, and I fell over so many times with this, is the execution. Most people wing it with delivery. I've seen all sorts, and I've done most of them myself, right? Video interviewing, client logins to software so they can see search data, behavioral profiling, client microsites, candidate briefing document, and the names of the products that I've seen, right? The names of processes and solutions. I've seen infographics, reports, psychometrics, all the bells and whistles, and I've seen the opposite. Take the retainer, do what you normally do, maybe a bit more priority. The reality of it is that a true search process isn't often necessary for a mid or senior hire, but it must mitigate all of the things that can go wrong. Because let's face it, as we mentioned earlier, the money up front doesn't solve many of the problems, right? And the devil with delivery is definitely in the detail. So how, for example, do you mitigate the risk of a key stakeholder going away mid-search or another stakeholder getting involved halfway through? How do you mitigate the risk of rejecting perfectly suited candidates or people using a bastardized version of contingent terms or borrowing someone else's retained terms that you don't understand the intricacies of? All of these things just don't cut it, right? So from a delivery standpoint, here's what's always worked for me. So it's essentially best practice headhunting. It's based on the traditional exec search model, but it's a little leaner, faster, kind of tailored to all levels of hire. It begins with a full briefing session involving all stakeholders to define and agree on the parameters of the search and the process. And that includes a few things. First, the full role profile. Functional and behavioral competencies, the geography and location of the candidate, target companies and any off limits. We'll agree the timeline, the process, and the customer's EVP, their employee value proposition. Now, once we're clear on the scope of the search, we essentially cast a net over the entire talent pool and identify every candidate across that geographical location who looks to have the skill set to meet the criteria. We then systematically and professionally approach every single candidate, using multiple methods, but that includes direct and professional headhunting. And we do that to gain as much interest in the opportunities as possible. The whole process is transparent. We share with the client every week our progress, a spreadsheet showing every candidate, and we can also collect any data that they'd like to. Salaries, benefits, bonuses, perception of them in the market, whatever's going to help. Now, if we're faced with a challenge, we work with them to re-steer the search. And ultimately, what that means is a long list of candidates emerges who are what we call QIA. Yeah, they're qualified against the criteria, they're interested in the opportunity, and they've been assessed against that brief, both functionally and behaviourally. And from that long list, with the client, we'll jointly agree a short list of 3 to 5 candidates for them to interview. At the end of this process, they will be absolutely confident that they're making their hire from all of the talent that's available to them at that time. So this process works, right? Like, we get emails like this, we get people posting in the community like this all of the time. The reason I want to share these with you is not to blow smoke up our ass, right? Like, it's to show you that it's possible. Like, it really, really is. Like, you guys can absolutely do this. You really, really can. There are over 150 testimonials on the website. And as I say, please, please, please use these as inspiration as you head into 2026, because these are people just like you. They're your peers, most of whom started on a free masterclass like this and are now flying with retained. So my message to each of you is, if I can do it, if they can do it, then why not you? You absolutely can. Yeah. So if retained features big in your 2026 plans, we've got, I suppose, a little bit of an early Christmas present for you. I'm giving away a free 2026 strategy session. In that session, I'm going to show you how to plug the gaps, improve process quickly to get you winning quickly, show you how to identify your quickest wins for the new year, right? And develop a bit of a personalized roadmap to help you start strong in January. Yeah, if you want 2026 to be the year you stop working for free and start stacking predictable, high revenue retained wins alongside maybe that contingent success, then this is for you. Yeah, after the call, I'm going to give you a bit of a booster kit as well. That's going to help you define your target audience. It's going to help you identify prospects, recommend retained, explain the process, and handle objections. Yeah, everything you need to make a really fast start. Okay, so I really, really hope that helped. How did we do? 45 minutes. So we've got 15 minutes left. Let me stop sharing my screen, and I will answer any questions that you guys have. If you want to start, if you haven't already, if you want to start putting questions in the chat, let's do that. Okay. Perfect. I can see you all again. Okay. Sorry, let me move this window up here. If it'll let me. It won't let me. Okay, let's see. Questions then. Okay. Do you use collateral materials or educational items to help visualize the process and results? Yeah, good question. Sometimes, so you can use visuals firstly for the delivery process. It's sometimes nice to use almost like a bit of a flow chart to show them how delivery flows. I think the other thing that you can use a visual for is that iceberg analogy, kind of helping them understand the difference between passive and active talent and where most of the talent sits and how they're missing out on that. But actually, I find the most important thing is not the use of kind of educational items or collateral. It's just using well illustrated visuals to walk them through that pitch and help them understand why you're recommending that as a solution. So you certainly don't need anything fancy. Okay, Sharon, my industry has had a lot of downsizing. The objection I get the most to my engaged contracts is my client feels they are getting good results from their postings. How do I switch that mentality? So, firstly, Sharon, my thoughts on that are, if they're getting what they want when they need it and they're enjoying the experience, they're never going to retain you, right? If they're solving problems themselves and they're seeing results, they are not going to retain you. Why would they and why should they? The question that I would ask them is, how are they confident? How do they know they're getting good results? And are they confident that they're getting the best person available to them in the market at that time? If the answer to that question is no, maybe on the next search you could do some almost you could share some kind of calibration profiles with them, maybe to show them what good looks like in the market and allow them to compare and contrast the candidates that they're seeing. I'd probably encourage you to have that iceberg conversation with them, help them understand that the vast majority of talent they'll be seeing are active candidates. And it's typically the passive candidates that house the best talent. So a calibration profile is something that I think could definitely help. Yeah, but again, Sharon, sometimes they don't need the best candidate in the market, right? There are certain roles where they just need a bum on a seat. They need someone that can do the job. And if that's what they need, then the reality of it is you'll probably struggle to sell them retain. How do you, audacious lady? Hello, audacious lady. How do you suggest handling the non-refundable retainer if the position is not filled? So it really is the same objection as to, well, what if you don't fill it? What happens then? And the conversation I'd have is that the commitment is mutual. We work with you until we reach a result. So the likelihood of it not being filled is kind of slim to none. We reach a result and our success rate on retained projects is 98% or 100%, whatever it might be. I can't guarantee to finding you the perfect candidate. I can't commit to that because they might not exist. But if they do, we will find them. Our process is rigorous and it's thorough and it's transparent. We'll share with you our workings every step of the way. If the perfect candidate doesn't exist, we find you the very next best thing. So yes, the retainer is non-refundable. We work in partnership. It allows us to provide that rigor and that process. But rather than being concerned and saying we will refund any retainer, I'd rather guarantee you that we will reach a result. Hey, Dean, can you touch on payment structure again and your recommendation? Yes. So again, a lot of the big search firms charge in thirds. First third payable on commencement, second third 30 days later, and the remaining fee 30 days after that. So it's a commencement 30 days and 60 days. And they then charge an additional fee if there's any kind of gap in actual remuneration. If there's an extra fee there, they'll charge that. I recommend you still charge in 3 stages. I would charge the first third payable on commencement before work commences on the project. The second third, I would charge a jointly agreed shortlist with the client. So when I have that shortlist meeting and I say we've now mapped the market, here are the best of the candidates that we've qualified and assessed, and they say, great, let's move forward to interview. At that point, I would issue the second invoice, and then the balance is due on placement, be that written offer or start date. No problem. No problem at all. Hey, Joseph, how do you deal with the objection of a client already pursuing 1 or 2 of the best candidates on the market? Real example I'm experiencing for a CTO search. So, Joseph, I assume what you mean is the client saying we've got this vacancy, but actually there's a couple of people in our network that we already know. We've reached out to them to see if it would be of interest. If that's the case, I think it probably how you deal with that depends on where they're at in that process, right? If they're pursuing 1 or 2 candidates and they're in interview, depending on where they're at in interview and depending on where they found these candidates from, right, dictates what we do. So if the candidates are either A, quite the way along in an interview process, or have been sent by other agencies, my recommendation would be they should exhaust that process first. Take those candidates through the remainder of the process. Hopefully they reach a result. If they don't, then they can come and engage with us at that point, and hopefully we've still got capacity to be able to help them. Just to provide some context to that, firstly, the reason it makes a difference where they're at in the process is if they're at final interview, they may as well just conduct the final interview, right, and decide if they want to hire them. The reason it makes a difference if they've come from another agency is if we then move through a process simultaneously, it exposes them to duplicate fees. Because if they place one of the other candidates, we're going to want paying, and the other agency are. Right? So it might be it's best to exhaust those options first. However, if they've reached out directly, if the candidates that are in process already are direct applicants, then what I'd say, actually, that's great. Our process complements this really well. What we'll do is we'll bring those candidates into our process. We're going to map the market in its entirety. We'll take those candidates through our process, and that means they'll be assessed in a way that's comparable to the rest of the talent pool. Yeah, it makes it easier for you to contrast candidates. It's fairer. But if ultimately, when we make the hire, it's your candidate that gets hired, your direct applicant, yeah, that'll be reflected in a slightly lower fee, right? Because I've not had to find that candidate myself. And I would encourage you to reduce the final third of the fee by 50% if that happens. So that would make what? Make your 30% fee 25%. Couple of points on that. Firstly, I've found typically if they've got candidates going through process, if they thought there was any chance they would fill this themselves, Joseph, without needing you and paying you a fee, they wouldn't be having the conversation with you. So normally they're asking the question because they feel like they should, but normally they're not particularly confident they're going to see a result. And the second thing that I would say on that is, I've totally forgot the second thing I was going to say was. My mind's gone totally blank, Joseph. Yeah, first thing is it's very, that was it. Sorry, it's very unlikely they think they're going to see a result. Secondly, it's very unlikely they actually will if they put them in your process. Once you know what you've got to beat, once you know the candidates that they've got, typically you'll find someone better. I've found. Sorry, long day, mind blank. I totally disagree with that, Dean. I totally disagree. There is a misconception that you cannot work on a retained basis for roles that have already been worked or gone to market. It's just not the case. It's not the case. Does it make, if anything, for me, it justifies a retainer even more. If clients have gone to market on a contingent basis and had normally a shit message delivered inconsistently by different agencies to the talent pool, they need someone to save the day. They need someone to take that clear and consistent message, to build that employee value proposition, and to take it to the talent pool in a way that resonates. The problem is, if a role's already been worked, right, straight away, for me, that makes me think it's going to be more difficult. I'm going to have to apply more time, more resource, more rigor, go further, go farther, be more committed to see a result. I ain't doing that for free. So I would go wholly against that and say, if a role has been worked contingently and they haven't seen a result, the only way I would go anywhere near it is if it was retained. Okay. Looks like that might be it. No more questions? No? Yes, please do scan that QR code. I would love to talk to as many of you as possible. I'd love to understand more about where you're at and kind of start helping you move forward with this. 2026, let's hope it's the best year ever and that it's full of loads and loads of retained business. And if I can help you in any way, make sure that happens, scan that QR code. I've freed some time up in my diary over the next couple of weeks. Okay. Aaron and Sarah behind the scenes, thank you as always. Kirsty in the chat, thank you very much. To everyone on LinkedIn, everyone on YouTube, thank you for joining us. I hope to speak to as many of you as possible very soon. Take care.